Welcome to the course Critical Thinking Skills in Science. We're on Chapter 7, Western Science. This is session number 3. We ended the previous session with the house being built. We had the foundation laid on top of the ground zero, the foundation. Then we had 4 columns, which were the basic belief system. Now what we're going to do is, on top of those columns, we're putting on the first or second floor. Now that floor is held up by those 4 columns. So what does that floor represent? That floor represents a system of thought. So the second floor is a theoretical system of thought called Western natural philosophy. Theoretical. There's kind of a, when you go back and study the term theory, and realize it comes from theorein, which Latin has to do with spectator, has to do with looking at things. And spectator is related to spectacles, and meaning that we're looking at something. So theory has to do with a way of looking at something. It's not that it's not quite a fact yet. It's that theory is a grid through how to understand the data, how to organize the data. It's through a theory. And so in this way, a theory is a grid through which to view the world. It's a grid that organizes the data, makes sense of it. Western, that's the cultural tendency perspective, separating the natural from the supernatural. And natural, meaning the domain that defines reality, because we've separated it off from what could be called the supernatural. So in other words, that system of thought produced by the source of reliable knowledge and the 4 basic beliefs forms a system of thought, and that system of thought is Western natural philosophy. Now, on that floor of Western natural philosophy, we're going to build the methods now of how to get to reliable knowledge. We know where to get it from. It's through human reason. But how do we apply human reason to the natural world? What do we do? Well, the number 1 pillar, number 1 method is, the first method is represented by the rationalists, or reason, is that, okay, we have to think about what should happen or would happen based on these basic beliefs. So in other words, we're using reason and applying logic. So the first method that we're looking at is logic implementing the basic beliefs and the foundation structure of the house. That's the first method. Second method is, the second pillar is represented by the empiricists, which means empirical knowledge, which is knowledge generated by our senses, through the human senses. So in other words, how do we get to reliable knowledge? 1, it's something that's based on the basic beliefs. It's reasonable, it's rational. Number 2, it's something that we can see, something that we can tangibly touch, feel, and see within nature, so we can experiment with it. So that is number 2, is empiricism. Now there's a third column, and this column is less related to the other 2 in a physical way of giving a way of getting to reliable knowledge, because this one, the third pillar, is represented by skepticism, by the skeptics. Now, the skeptics did not believe that we could get to reliable knowledge because, well, reason, they said, could be corrupted by one's faulty reasoning, or it could be influenced by what someone had drank or what other things. So that reason, they said, was not totally reliable. And empiricism, well, they said, well, under the same influences of whatever there might be, you can imagine things. And so empiricism, they didn't believe was 100% reliable. But they said, okay, we suspend judgment then. We just don't know. And that is part of skepticism, is rejecting or not saying that something, this is the way it is. Being skeptical is saying, well, it has a high probability, but we still haven't tested enough. And so, in other words, skepticism resubmits it to testing again, and continuous testing. Those are the three major philosophies, methods, and each method represents a philosophy which has been through history competing with each other. There are rationalists, there are empiricists, and there are the skeptics, that they all have been pitted one against the other of how to get to reliable knowledge. Well, in the 1800s, in the later 1800s, these three methods came together to form what is known today as the scientific method. So they came together to form a method. Together with a unity, they combined the groups of the rationalists with the empiricists, with the skeptics. They came together to form a one method, but a three-step one method. Starting with a hypothesis, and that's rationalism, that's thinking. Based on the basic belief system, they elaborated a hypothesis of how to interpret what they see. Then they applied it to observation. That's empiricism. So in other words, testing, which is a requirement of the scientific method, is out of empiricism. And then number three, that's not the final word. We have to adjust the hypothesis, and we repeat it and continue repeating because of the doubtfulness of being able to declare truth because of the methods. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, that's skepticism. So within the scientific method, we have rationalism, empiricism, and skepticism. So the scientific method is really a method that is determined by the three philosophies. So how does that work? Where did that come from? Where is it going? Well, what it will do is it is a method to secure that the knowledge that is generated is filtered through this method, and anything that does not meet the criteria of these three steps is rejected then as reliable knowledge. It cannot be reliable knowledge. So how about the concept of God? Can you apply science or the scientific method to the concept of God? And the answer would be, well, not really, because God is spirit. Nobody has ever seen God at any time, except for that God that became incarnate, which is Jesus Christ. We've seen him, or he has been seen, but God has not been seen. God the Father has not been seen, because God is spirit. So can he be subjected to empiricism? No, he cannot. You cannot see him. So logically then, he doesn't exist. He can't exist. But he can't exist anyway because of the rules, the basic beliefs. So this three-step system is a filter to be able to generate what is thought to be reliable knowledge. So that is the scientific method. Friedrich Nietzsche, he once wrote, "It is not the victory of science that distinguishes our 19th century, but the victory of the scientific method over science." Kind of like, well, what does he mean by that? What's he getting at? Well, what he's getting at is that science, scientia, meaning knowledge, we use science to generate knowledge, or knowledge generated by science has to be generated according to the scientific method. And the scientific method is a way of filtering knowledge so that it generates knowledge that is justified according to the basic belief system of the house. So the scientific method was a coming together of three philosophies. One was human reason that rejected God. Number two was empiricism that can't see God. And number three is skepticism that would be skeptical of anything that can't be seen or can't be justified by human reason. So Friedrich Nietzsche is saying it is not the victory of science that distinguishes our 19th century, but the victory of the scientific method over science. Now, previous to this, a lot of modern science was actually born by scientists that were godly men. They believed in God. They believed in creation. They were creationists. And a lot of the different disciplines within science were founded by men that believed in God and creation because they believed it was not random. They believed it was purposeful. They believed that there's patterns. They believed that there's reasons. So they studied. They began the study of the different fields of science because they believed that things were created and we could discover the pattern or the intricacies of that creation. Whereas in the 19th century now, the science is not the victory of science that distinguishes our 19th century, but the victory of the scientific method over science. So in other words, now to practice science, you had to submit to the scientific method. And the scientific method will not allow you to bring your God into science. You have to leave your God outside on the front porch and do your science Monday through Friday as a naturalist. And then you can still go to church on Sunday and believe in the supernatural, but do not bring your God with you to work on Monday because of the filter that was put in place. And that is what Friedrich Nietzsche is saying, is that, but the victory of the scientific method over science, because now it filtered what would be considered reliable knowledge. It put a filter on it to exclude anything that people might submit, saying that, well, that looks created, or that looks very intricate, that looks designed, that looks purposeful, all of that would be excluded by the scientific method. You could not entertain those ideas or even submit those kind of ideas because they do not fit within the filtering method. Would kick any idea out that included a outside source. You have a closed system, you cannot propose something from outside that system that came in and influenced inside the system. This is session 3. This is chapter 7, Western Science. We're building the house of Western Science and what it's built upon, starting with the lower level, the ground zero, the cultural tendencies, to the source of reliable knowledge, to the basic beliefs, to the methods of getting to that reliable knowledge. Thanks for joining me. This is Chapter 7, Western Science. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. Again, there's our information if you'd like to contact us sometime with any questions you might have. Thank you again for accompanying me, and hope to see you in the next one.